When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
I drew the attention of something, and it followed me for years.
I suddenly felt a weight on my chest so heavy I could barely breathe.
I'm terrified and I'm trying to scream, but there's nothing coming out of my throat. My throat had squeezed up.
From killer podcasts, true tales of the occult, otherworldly encounters, unexplainable events, this is Disturbed True Paranormal. Hello, and welcome back to the show. This week, we're bringing you 4 stories that will make your stomach drop. So sit back, listen closely, and dive into the horror. First, a story narrated by Catherine Restivo from Reddit user I Need to Vent 1000. I felt her fear.
This is the one and only time that I have ever felt like I legitimately experienced feeling a spiritual presence. When I was a kid, I used to spend a couple of the summer weeks out of state visiting my grandmother. She lived in a really small old town in Oklahoma and was only a couple of miles away from her best friend, Joan. In a lucky turn of events, the summer I was 13, Joan's 4 granddaughters happened to be visiting her at the same time I was in town. They were around my age, so we spent several days together. The paranormal experience I had happened the day I was invited to Joan's house for the first time. Joan's house, like many homes in town, was certainly built in the 1800s. It was enormous and beautifully Gothic. But besides that, I knew absolutely nothing about it or its history. Several hours into card games and fun, I asked where the restroom was. I was told to go upstairs and it would be the first door on my right. I walked to the opposite side of the house and went up the stairs, which made a 180-degree turn in the middle, effectively blocking the view of the downstairs completely. The second I made the turn towards the top half of the steps, I was overcome by fear and panic for seemingly no reason. I suddenly felt a weight on my chest so heavy I could barely breathe. I even considered ignoring how many sodas I had to drink earlier and walking right back downstairs to escape this sense of dread. I couldn't ignore my bladder, however, so I forced myself to finish ascending the stairs. It was afternoon, with plenty of natural light illuminating the upstairs hallway, but it felt like I was looking down this narrow hallway at 3 a.m. after watching a horror movie while home alone. I couldn't take my eyes off the door at the end of the hallway on the left. There was nothing there for me to be looking at, but I still felt the need to stare that door down as I backed into the restroom. I had never used the restroom and fled downstairs as quickly as I did that day. As soon as I got back downstairs, I felt instant relief and went back to having fun like nothing had happened. When my grandmother came to pick me up later and asked how it went, I couldn't help but mention that strange feeling I'd had about the second floor. I felt silly talking about it until she, in all seriousness, asked me to elaborate. I told her what happened, and my grandmother was absolutely amazed by the end of it. She seemed hesitant to say anything, but she could tell I noticed her reaction, so she decided to tell me the truth. Joan and her family had moved into this house during the 1950s when she was around 10 years old. The house was in rough shape as it had been unoccupied for many years, so lots of renovations were in order. Contractors realized that there was a missing room upstairs based on the window count, noting that what would have been a large closet had been completely walled off. When the wall was torn down, to everyone's horror, the skeletal remains of a teenage girl were found. Her wrist had been shackled to the wall behind her, and she even had scraps of hair and remnants of clothing still left on her. Somehow, Joan's family managed to overlook this grisly discovery and kept the home, turning the previously walled-off room back into a large closet. It was the very same room I'd felt the urge to stare at. It's been over a decade since I experienced this bizarre occurrence, but to this day, I believe I felt the pain and anguish that poor girl must have felt in her final days. I'm typically quite skeptical, but I cannot deny how I felt or explain my fixation on the door at the end of the hall.
Our next story is narrated by Dallas Stark about the spirit living in your mirror.
Back in 2007, when I was still a kid, my stepmother was a shopaholic who would just buy random crap from yard sales, estate sales, antique shops, as seen on TV products and vendors at fairs. I don't remember where she got the mirror from, or how I found out it came from a hospital. She might have bragged about that detail to me, but I'm not sure. It was a tall, skinny mirror with small, simple borders and was shaped perfectly to cover an entire wall at the end of the hall. To make things worse, there were doorways on both sides crossing this mirror, which made for a perfect optical illusion. A triple get-fucked-by-ghosts expressway. The hallway was long and skinny, stretching across to reach all of the bedrooms, bathrooms, office, and laundry room. When I say skinny, I mean claustrophobic. There was barely enough space to walk between the walls, and the hallway itself was about 12 feet long. And you'd have to look straight at this mirror every single time you were walking down the hall towards it. It was always unsettling to see my reflection seamlessly extending down the length of the hall, as though I was watching myself from a distance. I think one factor that boosted activity was the shit ton of negative energy produced by the abuse that occurred in our home on a daily basis. Plus, there was the fact that we lived on a farm in the middle of fucking nowhere on grounds that used to be a colonized settlement. There were still pieces of old stone homes in the area, but most were crumbled to the foundation. A completely rusted 1800s tiller fused to the ground added to the deserted landscape. My family's farm was named after the colonizers who'd lived here, but I'm not actually related to them by blood. Putting the mirror up in our hallway gave me uncomfortable vibes from the get-go, but it wasn't long before things became downright terrifying. Almost every night, when everyone was in bed, I'd hear distant, heavy, slow, shuffling steps coming from the end of the hall where the mirror was. I'd freeze up and become as quiet as possible as the steps went back and forth across the entire hall. Each time the steps reached my door, I'd hold my breath, wondering if this was the night something would push my door open. This would go on for hours into the night, sometimes stopping around midnight or 1 a.m. More often than not, I'd wake up at 3 a.m. Sometimes it would be silent, but other times, the steps would start up again. I was already an insomniac, so I was used to not getting much sleep and getting up for school at 6 a.m. When I'd get home from school, I'd find finger smudges all over the mirror. Smudges would always come back, even after I cleaned it. Whenever I asked my shit family if they heard anything, they never fucking did. But when I had friends over to stay the night, they'd hear it too. There was one time that scared the shit out of me and my bestie when the shuffling started up a little early. We were whispering to each other, asking if the other person heard it. Then a clear, droning moan that sounded like an old man came from right next to my bedroom door. My friend punched my shoulder, telling me to shut up. We had our heads under the covers, but I had the impulsive curiosity to peek out because I was getting kind of desensitized to it at this point. When I looked, there wasn't a clear apparition, but a messy range of colors, smearing shapes and hues of blue and orange like paint. The colors formed the image of a bony, old, bearded man with piercing eyes looking through the bedroom doorway. My friend and I stayed frozen in silence for a while, praying it would go away. I think we just stayed under the covers and whispered until we fell asleep. As time went on, I got used to it. I just sneaked my laptop under my covers to watch movies with headphones, since I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep with the noise. I became desensitized, but the mirror still had a couple more surprises for me in the daytime and started to affect other mirrors I came across. As a dumbass 6th grader, I once got caught up in a Bloody Mary ritual. My friends trapped me in the girls' bathroom with the light turned off and wouldn't let me out until I did the ritual. I was scared of the dark and desperately wanted out. I stupidly felt like I didn't have another choice, so I did it. When I completed the 3rd full circle and faced the mirror, I saw a different silhouette from mine. I had uncontrollable frizzy hair, but the reflection's hair was slick and straight. I screamed and managed to burst through the door that my friends were pinning shut. They thought that shit was hilarious and were dying laughing. I was terrified and hoped nothing more would come of it. One day, I was home alone putting away laundry. My parents' bedroom was right across the hall from mine. I was carrying a basket of my clothes from their bedroom to mine, which would only take 2 steps at most. I remember feeling watched and instinctively turned my head to look down the hall at the mirror. There was a shadowed silhouette in the mirror, completely blocking my reflection. I'll spare you the awful details of its appearance, as I don't want to accidentally invite it into someone's space. I'll tell you that it wasn't human, that's for sure. I screamed bloody murder and slammed my bedroom door behind me, completely freaking out. I remember panicking, thinking the thing would show up in my large bedroom mirror. Fortunately, I never saw the entity in that much detail again. However, I did see fast-moving shadows that would pass across multiple mirrors. I drew the attention of something, and it followed me for years, in any mirrors around me, sometimes even in physical spaces. But it always disappeared before I could fully register what I'd seen. My parents were divorced, and my mom had moved to a city about an hour away. When I went to see her on weekends, I'd see the thing there too. Whatever this thing was, after a couple years, it started to change its appearance occasionally. I was around 14 or 15 when it started switching between nightmare fuel and an attractive-looking dude with non-human traits. The first time its appearance changed was in my mom's apartment. It was late at night, and I'd been asleep in my room for a while. I woke up out of nowhere and suddenly sat up without thinking. And there it was, right in front of me, sitting on my dollhouse, grinning at me. It had exposed abs, a full six-pack. I was so confused and terrified that I didn't even scream. I just stared at it and slowly laid back down, pretending to go back to sleep. I never heard it make any noise, and I was too scared to open my eyes to check if it was still there. I just lay there in silence until I finally dozed off. I went through my teens associating this thing as my stalker, because it followed me every day, everywhere I went. I didn't tell anyone about it. It wasn't jump scaring me as much anymore. Instead, giving off vibes that it wanted me. I'm not sure if it was because I was so desensitized that it needed to find a new angle to get energy from me, or if it really was bizarrely interested in me in a romantic way. I'll never know for sure. It was weirdly comforting to not be alone and have something there with me at that awful farm. I don't know. Maybe I hallucinated it and was just coping with my isolation. There was one more final incident with the mirror when I was 17 years old. It was in the middle of the day, and as I was walking through the hall, I suddenly felt like I got impaled in the chest. It was so sharp and painful that I dropped to my knees. Breathing felt extremely painful. The sensation stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Strangely enough, years later when I got COVID, I ended up with costochondritis. The symptoms caused the same pain in the same location where I felt impaled. It's unnoticeable in warm weather, but anytime I'm in freezing cold air, that pain comes back, and it hurts so much to breathe. When I turned 18, I got the fuck away from that hellhole. But, of course, the being followed me. I started creating an emotional distance between me and it, because I knew this wasn't healthy for me. It still held on to me for years to pass, but when I got a real, living person as a boyfriend, it finally gave up. Not without a fight, however. For example, when I was on a phone call with my boyfriend, I'd hear my phone cut out, and when it reconnected, my boyfriend would sound creeped out, asking me if I heard screeching or roaring. It happened frequently enough that he preferred texting me. I never told him about the stalker. I've mentioned a few pieces of scary stories that sometimes involved it, but I'll probably never give him the full story. I don't have to worry about the stalker now, because it's been gone for a few years at this point. I'm very relieved I don't have to deal with it anymore. I'll never truly know how real any of that was. I know I was young and mentally unstable. I'm just sharing my experience. You can interpret it however you want. But to this day, I'm still terrified of mirrors.
You're listening to Disturbed True Paranormal. We'll be right back.
Summer's here, and you can now get almost anything you need for your sunny days delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get a chicken parmesan delivered. A cabana? That's a no. But a banana? That's a yes. A nice tan? Sorry, nope. But a box fan? Happily yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Here at the Almond Joy Factory, where tropical vibes abound, we use soft, fresh-tasting coconut.
The crunchiest almonds and delicious chocolate candy.
Ah, but do you know what our most important ingredient is? Sometimes you feel like a nut.
Sometimes you don't.
Almond Joy's got nuts and something even way better than that. Yes, Almond Joy is made with almonds and joy.
Welcome back to the podcast. Our next story is about a strange encounter in a hotel lobby, narrated by Bodhi Crowe.
It was my second or third month working the night audit at a hotel, and I had just gotten done running the financial audit when I heard the front doors opening. Our desk is relatively tall, and I was sitting in a chair, so I couldn't see who walked in. I stood up, fully ready for either an after end of day check-in or a walk-in. But surprisingly, it was neither. It was a homeless-looking guy with long, greasy gray hair, wearing an old flannel. He was standing in the lobby near the door, just looking at me. After a few moments, I asked if he was a guest or if there was something he needed help with. He didn't say anything and just kept standing there looking at me. I began to feel uncomfortable, so I called my security guy, James. I asked him to come to the front desk, and he said he was on his way. It took him a couple minutes, as he was coming from the 4th floor maintenance closet on the other end of the hotel. As soon as I heard the lobby elevator descending, the homeless guy turned around and walked out of the hotel. Finally, James showed up and asked what was wrong. I told him about the guy who came in and how he just stared at me until he heard the elevator. James told me he would take a walk around to see if he could spot the guy, as we have a strict no trespassing policy, and we had to be sure the guy left the property. About 20 minutes later, James returned to the desk and informed me he didn't see the guy. He remarked that it would be good to check the security cameras, so that if the guy came back, we would recognize him. This is where things get weird. We stepped into the back office where we have the monitors, and rewound the footage to take a look at the guy. But when we got to the point in the footage where the doors opened, it looked like no one walked in. We could see the doors open and me stand up to talk to the guy, but he wasn't in the footage at all. Keep in mind, I work in a brightly lit lobby. This was very odd and freaked me out a bit. I know there are stories of homeless people who had been found dead in this area, and even stories about deaths in this hotel, but I didn't actually know if they were true or not. Needless to say, James stayed close to the lobby for the rest of the night, as I was pretty shaken up. It's been a while since then, and I haven't seen that homeless guy since. I still do wonder if I actually saw someone or something that night, or if it was just a hallucination. But if it was a delusion, then how did the doors open by themselves?
Our final story is a voicemail sent in by disturbed listener Kat. If you'd like to submit a voicemail story of your own, go to hotline.disturbedpodcast.com. You just might hear your voice on the show. A night audit that turned into a nightmare.
Hi, so I'm a national park worker and I figured I would share my story. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but I don't know, I'll just share it. 2017, I was working in Yellowstone in the northern part, and there was this hotel that I was working at. For the most part for the season, the hotel had been closed for renovations, and we only had cabins. And we were working at kind of like the ski rental office. But at the end of the season, so when you're working in a national park, usually your seasons during the summer are May to October. Right around September, the company had chosen to open up the hotel, even though it was still being renovated. So the floors are still pulled up and everything, but, they were doing some fixations. I don't really know why they chose to open it up. I just worked there. So our night auditor had left mid-season, so they asked me to cover. And there was only 2 months left in the season, so I said, okay, why not? The night shift was 9 p.m. to 7 a.m., so 10-hour shift, 4 days a week. There was also a ghost story going around that a security guard 2 years before had ran out of the hotel screaming and was just traumatized. Something about a painting that was bleeding. No one knew the security guard. No one knew the actual story, so none of us paid mind to it. We just thought it was the usual ghost story. So I didn't have any issues with doing the night audit. And also, when you do the night audit, you get a free perk. One of the chefs from the fine dining restaurant, you pick out your dinner the day before, and they will make it for you, put it into the refrigerator. And then the security guard on that night you just have to radio down, and they'll heat it up for you and bring it to you whenever you ask. And I read all the Harry Potter books. I watched all the seasons of Game of Thrones that were out that year in the span of 2 weeks. So it was pretty easy. You only had 2 hours of reports and then you were done. And you could hang out the rest of the night. And most of the time, the security guards would be bored too, so I would call down to them and radio them for a cigarette break. And they would often come down just to talk. It was actually a pretty relaxed gig. I think the biggest issue I had at the time was one time a bull elk walked into the lobby. But there was no big deal, no one got hurt, and we were just sitting there looking at it and everything was fine. So for the most part, I felt pretty confident. Now, this was a big hotel. It was built back in the 1800s, and Teddy Roosevelt stayed there one time. So you expect there's to be some history. So one day, it was about 2 a.m. in the morning, and I radioed the security guard on duty, who is a good friend of mine, and told him, hey, can I have my food? Which usually takes him about 20 minutes because the restaurant's across the way on the resort and they have to heat it up and then they have to bring it back to you, X, Y, and Z. So usually about 20 to 25 minutes, I was expecting my food to be there. So that's why it was weird when all of a sudden 5 minutes later, I heard his voice calling me from down the hallway on our ground floor. So I kind of poked my head over the counter and I was like, Ben, you there? And it just keeps saying my name. And it was Ben, but it was weird. It was really just kind of not docile is a word I want to use, but just monotone. No emotion, no nothing. And so I kept on calling for him, Ben, what's up? And it just kept saying my name. So I was kind of just sighed and rolled my eyes. I thought he was pulling a joke. So I was all right, whatever. So I go down the walkway. Basically from the counter, you go to the left and you go down the hallway. Now the hallway goes down to the left and down to the right after you hit this kind of T-bone. It was sounding like it was coming from the exit door, which is on the left. So I start walking down. And as I'm walking down, I get really, really cold, but I didn't think anything of it because it was snowing outside. And I'm from California, from the desert, so I wasn't used to the cold anyway. I keep calling for him and he's not in the hallway. So I assume that he's outside the exit door. I keep walking down the hallway. And as soon as I get to the third to last door, the last light, the one that's right over the exit door, shuts off, just fizzles out. I kind of stop for a second. I'm like, okay, but it's just like an old hotel. It's fine. So I start walking down again. When I get to the second door, the second light turns off. Right now at this time, there's light above me, but right in front of me, there's darkness. And I'm just thinking, okay, this is kind of weird. Is like a switch going off or something? And then a black foot, something that looks like it's covered in tar, just oozy black. A foot steps out of the darkness, just 1 foot right in front of me. And I look up and there's nothing. All I see is a foot coming out of the darkness, but keep in mind, the exit door had a window where you can see outside, and I could see the light from the street lamp outside on the pavement outside through the window. But I can't see a body in front of me where this foot is, where a body should be. I start stepping back. At this point, I'm trying to reconcile what's going on. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm like, okay, am I dreaming? Am I sleepy? What's going on? Did I smoke too much weed before I came into work? And then the next light shuts off and I just hear this thump. And I can't say what it was, but it felt like somebody was crouching to the floor. I feel in my gut that's what it was. So the foot has disappeared because of the third light. And then I see a tar black hand. When I say tar black, I mean it looks like something's dripping from it, like tar, like ooze dripping from it. And it's this creature-esque hand just stretching out from the darkness, and it just plants itself in this spider web kind of position right outside of the darkness. And I immediately turn and I start booking it, and I just hear something thumping behind me. I mean, right behind me. It's right on my heels. I'm terrified and I'm trying to scream, but there's nothing coming out of my throat. My throat has squeezed up and I'm running. I am booking it like a freaking track star. And I can just hear this thing behind me. And I go turn the corner back to the front desk, and I look behind me just for a split second. I see that spiderous hand just reaching out for me, and I'm running for my fucking life. Thank God for cardio. Oh my God. And I am running, and I get into the lit up lobby, and I run straight into the security guard. And I smash into him. He drops my food all over me. He's looking at me. He's like, what? Are you okay? Who's after you? He's thinking that he needs to arrest somebody. I just turn around, and the lights are all on in the hallway. And I was terrified. I had a night terror that night of the same thing sitting on my chest. But after I left Yellowstone, I never saw it again.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Disturbed True Paranormal, a production from the Disturbed team at Killer Podcasts. I'm your host, Doug Bailey. Our producer is Noah Fouts. Our audio engineers are Nathan Corson and Will Pritz. Executive producer, Bridget Coyne. For more chilling stories, behind-the-scenes content, and early access, support us at patreon.com/disturbedpodcast. Until next time, friends, stay safe out there.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.